Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So I'm going to give you a little update and plan on our working group. I'll be the speaker today, but Kyla and Anish are both online to answer questions and everything. I have someone in my office right now that keeps making signs, but I'll try to stay focused. So I'll be talking for about 20 minutes, but hopefully I won't be too long. So Ocean UQ, working group on ocean uncertainty quantification for physical variables, activity updates. So if you haven't heard of this working group before, I just wanted to recap and tell you a little bit about the vision and the objectives of this working group. Basically, we want to develop strategies as well as identify best practices for improving the understanding, derivation, communication, and utilization of uncertainties in ocean observing and modeling. We also want to make resources on UQ freely available to the ocean observing and modeling communities. And these resources can take the form of manuals, pedagogical material online, links to relevant community efforts, announcements about uncertainty quantification activities in physical oceanography in general. And really what we were hoping to do is also instigate a cultural change in ocean observing and modeling of uncertainty quantification. And that seems a pretty ambitious goal, but please note that one of the 5 US CLIVAR goals is to better quantify uncertainty in the observations, simulations, prediction, and projections of climate variability and change. So this is very much something which is at the top of the agenda of US CLIVAR as a whole. And also there's, when we thought about, putting this working group together, would it be from the post panel of our US CLIVAR with Anish and Kyla, we realized that there was kind of a discrepancy, a dichotomy between the known requirements from scientific practices. We know that uncertainty are important. We know that we need to have a framework to actually derive and utilize them. Yet, if you look at the main documents, such as the framework for ocean observing that emerged from OceanObs 09, or the latest goals of the Global Ocean Observing System 2030 strategy, none of these documents contain any reference to uncertainty or error, or any of the variants of this word. So it's quite interesting because we know it's important, yet it hasn't percolated yet in, programmatic documents. Things are changing, of course, but I think it's very important to point that out. All right, activity update. We finally formed the group and we have 16 members. So Kyla Drushka, physical oceanographer, Anish Subramaniam, a weather and climate scientist, myself, physical oceanographer, and the 3 of us are the co-chair for this working group. We have Alec Petty, who is the climate scientist from NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. We have Patrick Heinbach, a computational oceanographer who is at the University of Texas at Austin. We have Mark Bushnell, who is a physical oceanographer and used to be at NOAA. We have our own Starfleet officer, Shell Ganteman, a physical oceanographer, currently at the Farallon Institute. We have Amy Braverman, a statistician from NASA JPL, who is also part of the data science working group. We're very fortunate to have Wendy Parker, who is currently in the UK, but she's a philosopher of science, and she'll be joining Virginia Tech this summer. We have Adam Sikulski, who's a statistician based at Lancaster University in the UK, but who's been collaborating extensively with oceanographers in the past. So we're very glad to have him. We have Michael Kurusela, who's also a statistician from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, who also has been collaborating quite a bit with oceanographers. We have Donata Giglio, a physical oceanographer, also from the University of Colorado Boulder. We have Carol Ann Clason, physical oceanographer, who is located in the middle part of the picture on the upper right, and she's from Woods Hole. We have Sergei Frolov, who's also a member of the US CLIVAR Post Panel, a physical oceanographer, who is located on the lower part of the picture on the left. We have Roberto Sabia, a physical oceanographer, who's from the European Space Agency and is based in Italy. And David Moroni, data engineer from NASA JPL. In terms of our plan activities or the outcome of this working group, which will take place for 3 years, our first objective is really, our first outcome will be to develop a community-driven web platform for uncertainty quantification knowledge and strategies. Our second activity outcome will be to produce peer-reviewed open access articles on uncertainty quantification for observational and model ocean data. And finally, our last main activity will be to organize a summer school or a workshop on the topic of uncertainty quantification. And we are going to reflect with the panel members and throughout our activities to see what format will be best during the last year. Shall we have a workshop, a training? We'll decide that later on as we think about our activities. So updates. So we started at the end of April, so we're just getting started. And we're building an online ecosystem for our group and our activities and promote them, as well as provide the resources to the interested parties. We've set up a Twitter account at ocean_UQ. Please follow us. We haven't posted anything yet. We're going to launch that pretty soon. And we started to build our website. And so that website is basically built by scientists for scientists, and it will be a hub through which we'll be able to share our material and the relevant material for the topic. One of the main activities is that we're going to ask each of our members to contribute monthly blog entries on the topic of UQ. And so once again, it will be a blog written by a scientist for scientists. And from my own personal experience and from the experience of other group members, we've realized that having those blog posts advertised through Twitter or other social media means was actually a different way of communicating with scientists, which is outside of the traditional publishing framework. And we found that it's been very beneficial to have this sort of candid framework to allow honest conversation and plain explanation of some of the things we care about when it comes to uncertainty quantification. What does that mean to have a confidence interval? What is that plus or minus mean? And what are the techniques that are being used in satellite oceanography to determine errors and things like that? So just plain blog entries that will be written by our members. For the website also, we started to curate and organize a list of papers, manuals, web links to other efforts, US-based or international, on uncertainty quantification for oceanography. Maybe we'll have also an online section with lectures or maybe Python notebooks that people can come in and run right on the website, tutorial about statistical tools, et cetera, So we are like collating and putting all this material together. And maybe we'll have a forum as well, where we'll allow a direct engagement of the community to ask questions, to ask directly to our members, or to discuss among ourselves how to basically deal with uncertainty quantifications. So this is an update on our first outcome. So for the first year, as I said, we're planning on developing that website. We're planning on engaging with other UQ groups, such as oceanbestpractices.org, ICIOD, PMIP, etc., and also try to see how we can collaborate with the other working groups, such as the data science working group. And then in terms of activities, we are meeting every 2 months online to discuss our task and monitor our progress. The second year, 2021, 2022. So by the end of the first year, beginning of the second year, we are hoping to be able to launch the website with all the materials. We don't want to launch it too early because we don't want people to go get there and then have nothing to look at or nothing to utilize. We want to make sure we're going to launch a website with a lot of materials where people will be drawn to come back to. And hopefully we'll announce it in a short publication such as EGU, EOS, or BMS. And then also we'll utilize a meeting of opportunity, and we'll have a town hall as well. We're planning on having a town hall to explain our activities, and then we'll start planning the workshop of the summer school. And in the third year, we'll host the workshop. We'll continue to populate the material for the website, and we'll continue having bi-monthly teleconferences to advance our task and monitor our progress. And then we're also planning on publishing a little bit more publication, a little bit more consequent, talking about the strategies that we have identified and the best practices that we suggest for uncertainty quantification in ocean observing. And that's it for our outcome. And if you have questions, we're both online. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your question out loud, or you can type in your chat box. We also encourage you to put your video on when you ask the question to increase your engagement.
So, Shane, this is Charlotte DeMott. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
I can hear you.
So I think it's really interesting, this approach of having social media sort of being the platform for a lot of these types of discussions. And one question I had is, if a lot of this information is being communicated that way, is there any way to like cite material that has been posted to social media, or will that type of information be incorporated into a more formal journal article?
Kyla, Anish, would you like to reply, or do you have an answer for Charlotte?
Yeah, I can add something.
Go ahead.
Great question, Charlotte. So in our proposal, in our proposal for the working group, we had also written in that we will be publishing a couple of peer-reviewed journal articles. Like, our main objective with the engagement on the social media, on the website, creating a discussion forum, is to make the community aware of what already exists, which is not necessarily something new that can be published as a peer-reviewed journal article. But in addition to that, the working group will be working towards, one of the things is to have a review or like an overview of the best practices for UQ, or uncertainty quantification, for ocean physical variables. And this is something we'll be planning for a peer-reviewed journal article. And then there's a plan for another peer-reviewed journal article, which will be more on something new that the working group will find out in 3 years. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to add.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi, Shane and Kyla and Anish.
Hello, Antonietta.
Hi. So this is a very interesting working group. I'm glad you have developed it, and I think it's so as you know, there are like the observing system have been redesigned in all the 3 oceans, and at least I'm more familiar with what is going on, the discussions around the TPOS. And there has been a lot of discussion, for example, about satellite winds versus buoy winds. And so it seems to me that, I think Kyle already is talking about how accurate is salinity from space. And I think this could be also something important for the working group to address. I think these are big initiatives, and so understanding what we can learn from different data sets and the degree of accuracy, and also methods to compare, because comparing like satellite data with buoys, it's not trivial. I think the exact comparables should be like the data should be collocated, and so anyway, this is just a suggestion.
Yeah, Kyla, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the main focuses of the working group. We sort of have in situ observations, satellite observations, and data assimilation products, and really thinking about the uncertainty quantification in all of those. And that question of satellite and in situ observations, whether they be salinity or buoy winds, is a major one that has been sort of motivating us this whole way. So we have a number of people in the working group who are focused on that question exactly. But yes, we're on it, and we fully agree. That's important.
I think just like I think we're trying to maybe bring a little bit more formalism, in uncertainty quantification by bringing expertise from outside physical oceanography, maybe bringing more stats and formalism in what we do. We also want to make sure that the individual efforts from, let's say, the SST community or the sanity community or the physical oceanography community that are each working on their in their own corner on one specific topic, how these ideas and concepts can translate from one activity to the other. And so, humbly, we're trying to be a little bit of a portal, or maybe like a focus center where we would be bringing those activities, awareness to different groups. And I think we've assembled a group of people in the working group that have enough connection in all these different activities that hopefully will be broadcasting our activities and trying to bring attention to these topics to the different communities. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, so this is Mike Patterson.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, a quick question regarding some of the near-term priorities then in terms of your online presence and what topics you, kind of playing off of what Antonietta just asked, what are some of the near-term high priority topics, or for your blog lineup, if you could share some of the initial topics that you'll be tackling beyond Kyla's initial one on salinity.
Yes, so if I was fast enough, I could draw up the spreadsheet we have. I think Donata Giglio is planning on talking about uncertainty in ocean heat storage. I think I'd like to talk about the formalism of error bars that is not uniformized across publication and vocabulary of people. What else do you guys remember other people wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so I'll be talking about stochastic representation in dynamical models and data assimilation. So representing uncertainty as we are developing the reanalysis.
I think
so. It's one of the topics that.
Yeah, I think Alec Petit wants to talk about quantifying uncertainty in uncertainties of sea ice. Take it to another level. I think Wendy Parker, our philosopher of science, had another topic she's planning on, discuss as well. So it will be really, so we'll be following the lead of our members and what they're ready to contribute at.
So an additional question then for our audience here, is there the ability downstream, if you're starting with your membership for your initial set of blogs, is there the ability for others to help participate or at least suggest ideas that they'd like to see covered through the blogs?
I don't see why not. I don't see why not. Yes, definitely.
And that's something we did discuss, that in addition to others suggesting our working group members, the 16 members, like we've tried to choose them to be not overlapping in expertise, but also having a wide reach among the different communities. So each member will reach out to their own community and get expert opinions from there, and what are the key topics that should be addressed in the blog by our group.
Yeah, and just to sort of follow up on that, we are, of course, welcome to suggestions from any of the US CLIBAR panels or SSC as to topics that we could be focusing on. So please stay tuned to what we're doing and let us know if you think there's something we can be doing differently or in addition. Yeah,
and I think Antonietta's suggestion was great, that like all the observing systems like the TPOS, Indus, Atlantos, they're all coming up on a new phase. So maybe we can engage effectively in informing those communities as well.
So on that, I'll just hop in as well to say, if you're not aware, there's an international CLIBAR meeting next year. Antonetta is helping to coordinate that, I think, that yes. is focused on global to coastal ocean observing. And in particular, it's going to be bringing together all of the basin panels in international CLIBAR, all 5, along with Global Synthesis and Observation Panel, to collectively examine our opportunities for advancing in a certain way the needs of the global ocean observing system, and in particular, bringing from the open ocean into the coastal regime and engaging developing countries' participation in particular and capacity building in those countries as we get into their EEZs and link up with activities that there's potential for them to participate in that are near to shore than the open ocean contributions that many of the other countries are making. So this would be a good opportunity, I think, for this working group to engage in terms of where you are in the process next year and sharing some of the information that you've already gleaned with this international community effort.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for bringing that up.
So I had a question on that, Mike and Antonietta. I think this was briefly discussed at the SSC meeting in March also about this International Climate Workshop, and there was also a plan for a National Academy of Science workshop on a very similar topic that Eric Lindstrom mentioned, that he was engaged with the US community to organize that. Is there further development on that, like in terms of combining the two workshops, or like seeing what, like having a conversation between the two groups?
Well, so I think there ought to be an awareness and an interconnectivity, as we're suggesting here for this working group and the PAWS panel itself. And in fact, I've garnered resources for 3 of the PAWS panel members to participate in that international meeting. So that's just an update for you. That just occurred. And so we do want crosstalk. I think the Academy effort is really focused on the challenges for sustaining the U.S., particularly the U.S. contributions to the international goose, and shoring up that. And so I think your working group as well can help engage with that effort. And along with the PAWS panel, we'd like to see representation of the U.S. CLIBAR interests, community interest, well represented in the discussion of sustaining and expanding the observing system and the U.S. commitments to that. So that's a bit different, where this international effort is really doing it at the international level, and in particular, linking the global to the coastal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike, I take note that the involvement of this working group in those efforts will be geared towards really putting uncertainty at the forefront of the discussion and making sure uncertainty quantification and the awareness of those issues get typed in those documents and reports that come out of those, observing system strategies.
Yeah, I think that's right on.
Yeah, I know, I take that note. Yeah.
So going back to the 2 meetings, actually, I was not aware of the Academy of Science meeting. I think the one from International CLIBAR was a suggestion already initially put forward by Lisa Beale. She's the co-chair of the Indian Ocean panel, and I think she was a former member or co-chair of one of the US CLIBAR panels. And I think was mainly motivated by the fact that since there are these different observing systems that are being redesigned in all 3 oceans, kind of sharing experiences among the different panels, since each panel has discussed their own observing systems, I think would be very valuable, but also involve the panel that deals with data simulation, GSOP, because that, a lot of the emphasis also on designing this observing system is to improve analysis, ocean analysis, and then forecasting. So, and then, there is the other big component of capacity building for and coastal observations, which I think some country may have and not make it, or they could, develop the capabilities of providing them. So, yeah, I think what you are doing in this working group would be very relevant for that meeting, which is planned for the beginning of May 2021. So finger crossed for next year meetings. But yeah.
So we have a question in the chat from Nadia Vinogradova-Schiffer, who's asking, can you briefly remind about the overarching ambition? Is it merely a platform to share how we treat errors for various platform and variables, or is there a utopic goal to develop common recommendation across the field? Thank you for your question, Nadia. I think that's very important. I think we're being ambitious and we're trying to do both. So not only do we want to provide practical resources for our fellow oceanographers, but as I said at the beginning, one of our objectives is really to instigate a cultural change. And that cultural change would be to ingrain best practices, common practices to address the topic of uncertainty quantification. So in order to deliver, we want to give practical resources, but we also want, in the long run, have that utopic goal. I don't know what Kyla and Anish think about that, or anybody else for that matter, but that's our goal. And we have another question in the chat. Victoria Coles is asking, along these lines, is there the potential for development of metrics that could be partially aligned with other groups working on the development of metrics for assessing models? Let me take apart that question if anybody wants to answer.
And yeah, I can add to that and also connect to what Nadia was asking. Yeah, I agree totally with Shane, and our goal is twofold. Like, one is to bring up a cultural change to make the community more aware of uncertainty quantification and what are the best ways to do that. And some smaller groups are doing this already, but it's not widely done in a best practices way across the community. In terms of metrics and developing metrics, that would be one of the ways that we would be doing this, right? Like, how do we evaluate if our uncertainty is accurate? How do we evaluate if our product is accurate? And what is it within the uncertainty bound? So definitely, yes, like the metrics do play a central role in how we evaluate if the uncertainty is the right amount. So we would be engaging in those groups that are developing metrics. For instance, like one of the examples that Shane said, a blog will be on ocean heat content and uncertainty on ocean heat content. So what are the metrics that are used for evaluating how much what's the ocean heat content, and then what's the uncertainty on top of that? So that's like a totally independent community of quantifying ocean heat content, but we'll be engaged with them in terms of better quantifying uncertainty and representing that. Yeah, that's it from me. I think, yeah, we had one more from Patrick, right? Oh, okay, Patrick Heimbach just messaged in saying the National Academy workshop has a different focus. It follows on from a 2017 consensus study on sustaining ocean observations. The second workshop will be geared towards involving private sector to sustain the observing system. Okay, so it's along the lines of what Mike was also mentioning.
And then I think there's a question. There's a question from Xin Feng. How can the people outside the working group contribute? Can contact group members directly? Can the UQ platform help to distribute their relevant studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think once the way to participate right now is to contact me and Shen and Anish directly now. And once our materials are up, our website and our blog and our Twitter is actually rolling, which is hopefully in a month or two, to contact us through that platform. And your second question is whether the UQ platform can be used to help distribute relevant studies. Absolutely. I think that is really our goal, is to promote best practices in uncertainty quantification. So if you have a study that's relevant, please send it to us and we will included on our list of resources. And that's also sort of going back to Mike's question of whether people from outside of the group can contribute to the blog. I think eventually that might be a good platform to do that, is say you've written a paper that's demonstrating a uncertainty quantification technique, perhaps writing a blog post that distills that UQ part of your paper would be a good way to promote that best practice and get it sort of in the canon of literature that we're collecting.
Just one, yeah, great, Kara. One other thing we have discussed is like having a discussion forum in the long term, right? Like maybe towards the second or third year of the working group, we'll also set up a discussion forum on the website for the larger community to have a discussion and experts to engage in. That's another way that the community will be engaged with the working group.
Thank you. So it's 1:32 here, and I think this is a good point to wrap up now. So thank you, Anishin and Kyla, for the presentation today. So like I said earlier, I'll send a recording of this out later this week, and I'll also post it on the UQ Working Group website as one of the resources. So we'll continue this webinar series this time next week. So 12 p.m. or no, my bad, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, June 9th, and that will feature our water isotopes working group. So hopefully I'll see everyone next week.